live.
So we are live. Okay. So, yeah, as some of you guys have learned, we have a strange connection with the broadcast room. So, we are live. So, I guess you can start.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Salzman, and I want to talk a little bit about something that's near and dear to me as a computer collector. In fact, this is pretty much my very first computer. Not this one, but this one's a nicer looking one. Commodore Vic-20. Came out in 1981 in the US. This, by the way, is my actual first computer. It's yellowed a bit, and it still works except for this left shift key. But this is where I learned really to get into the computer stuff. If I wasn't playing at a Radio Shack store with whatever they have on display. So, as a introductory computer for most people, they came out about $300. They came out at $300, and for most people it's considered a toy, and I guess to some degree it is, but it is capable of doing an awful lot more. To get people started into computers, I was 15 years old when I got mine, so I'm learning to program in BASIC. Let me turn this thing on now, show you what it looked like, what we had to work with. There we go. We also got old TVs here, so bear with us. That was our screen, all 22 by 23 character display. Real easy to read. You get on one of these things, you type in BASIC 10, print, hello, 20 to 10, and run. We made it do something. However, some people found these to be a low-cost computer to do some real work. And that's what I'm trying to demonstrate here, is that the Vic-20 was capable of doing an awful lot for not only games, but also productivity, even schoolwork. And of course, to get into the career of computer programming, which is what I do for a living, and thanks to a Vic-20, that's what I got started with. So you bought the Vic-20 for $300, and you wanted to start writing your own programs in BASIC. But to do that, you had to find something to store it on. So you basically bought a cassette storage unit, which is a very popular option at the time for most home computers. That's about another $100. I think they actually dropped in price. This is my original tape cassette too. I think they dropped in price shortly after the computer came out. So I can write my program, I can save it on standard cassette tape. And then Mom and Dad says, hey, that's a neat little thing. Can you keep track of our checkbook for us? Well, they did make software for home financing. So already this little $300 computer, well, $400 with the tape player, now becomes useful for Mom and Dad to keep track of their financing, or their finances. And then you get older, and then you're in school and you have to write reports and papers and stuff like that. Well, before we get into that stuff, let's get into the fun stuff. You're in school. It was not uncommon to get all sorts of cartridges for the Vic-20. It was a very popular thing at the time. This one is the visible solar system. You just pop that into the expansion slot of the computer. And if it doesn't flake on you. The problem with these machines when they get old is all the contacts start oxidizing. And we, as collectors, we learn to deal with this, and it happens. I even tested this cartridge earlier and it did work, but sometimes you just have to wiggle it in there. And there we go. Now we can learn a bit about the planet Earth. Let's see. It's been a long time since I used this one. There we go. Look at planet orbits. So I can learn a little bit about space, about the solar system with this cartridge. Or I can, and these cartridges usually sold for about $25 at the time, 1981 to 83, 84. Then we get companies like Magic that used to make a lot of Atari 2600 games. They make stuff, some of their games for Vic-20. So you have fun with this. So this one works when I plug it in. Not bad for games. You saw some games earlier. I think you saw Defender earlier today with Alexander and Jonathan had their 6502 thing. Same kind of Vic-20. And then you had those who got serious into programming. So, let's see if I find the right one here. They wanted to start doing graphics and maybe some sound. So they have a special cartridge which gives them a little extra RAM. It started out with 3,500 bytes, now it has 6,500 bytes, a little more to program in with BASIC. And then they wanted to load some programs, but they got tired of working with tape. So they bought themselves a disk drive, which went for about $400. This isn't an original age Vic-20 drive. This was like the next year or something like that. The original would be a Vic-1540. This is a 1541, but it looked very similar. And if you got really serious, you went and bought a second one. So you have two of them. So we're in this for how much now? Nearly $1,000. We're starting to build up to productivity. And so we have, we want to get serious in writing our programs. We write software using cartridges that let us have special access to graphics and sound on the computer. And I have one on here. I'm going to load it up from this disk drive here. And cross my fingers that it works. Okay, this one's plotting sine waves and other trigonometric functions. But then a seasoned programmer or somebody who's really into this would change the formula and plot this stuff maybe for calculus class or something like that. So it doesn't have a very high resolution display, but it still has a very good purpose, provided you, of course, get the appropriate components to either make the job easier or to make the job fun. So now that you got done looking at the, you got done playing your games, got to get that out first. You got done looking at the solar system and you started working on some calculus stuff. Now you want to do your school reports. So hopefully you can go out and get the $500 printer. And then we're talking 1982, 83 prices. The Commodore Vic-1525 printer. And then you spend about $50 for a word processing cartridge. Yes, the Vic-20 did do word processing. There's not many programs out there that do that, but they're cartridges like this did give you that capability. Now it doesn't start up in the word processor. That's one of the drawbacks to the Vic-20 is not every cartridge auto starts. You actually have to type a command to get it started. This program, the Right Now word processor, actually came with keyboard overlays, so you know which function keys and other keys did what. To start this one, you have to basically launch a machine language program, and now you're in a word processor. Not much to it, but you can do. I'll just do a hello there. As I type my text, it gives me control codes, let me know that I hit an enter there. I can hit tab, I can back up, I can do other kind of formatting. I can do what most word processors do with formatting text, copying, erasing, moving blocks of text, primarily as indicated by this function key template, by using combinations of the Commodore key or the control key and also the function keys. I can do pretty much basic word processing. So I go to print this, I hit the print function, it asks me how I want my print margins. I just leave everything standard. And actually, let me turn on the printer first. Now it's going to feed a whole page out. And my ink is a little dry, but you can see it has the word hello there, while it ejects the page. And we're into this almost, I think, $1,400. But it is a productivity machine at this point. And you can buy Commodore branded joysticks. There's a lot of stuff you can buy from the dealers. These were actually sold in dealers before they were sold in stores like Kmart, Sears, whatever your local department stores were. They started selling them. And it doesn't end there. At the time, there was online services like CompuServe. I think that was one of the biggest ones that were out there. So if you wanted to get information online, you would get yourself a modem. And it would plug into the back of the computer, and then with the right software, you can dial. CompuServe usually provided that kind of stuff, and you can access your stocks or whatever. You can download things as text files. You can load the text files in the word processor to print. It became very versatile. I actually have two different types of modems here. This is kind of what they looked like at first. This is what they turned out to be, nice and slick and streamlined. They plug into the back of the computer here. You have all these things hanging off of the back. And if you wanted to learn it, maybe at first you didn't know how to program, so you can get software to teach you that stuff. This is a two-part series of books and tapes to let you learn to program. So it wasn't just a game machine, even though kind of like the Commodore 64, which came after it, was primarily used as a game machine. It could be put to more serious work. Some of the other things I wanted to show is some of the accessories that were available for it. They actually made a set of paddles for some games, like breakout type games that were Vic-20 branded. But the nice thing is, if you had an Atari 2600 before this, you could plug in the Atari 2600 paddles or the Atari 2600 joystick and still be able to use it in here for all your games, or if you have a program that paints on the screen, you can use the joystick for that. There wasn't much in the way of mice, unfortunately. That kind of came a little after with the Commodore 64. And one other thing I wanted to do is load a file here, something I typed up earlier. I just always keep forgetting the file name. So I'm loading something that I wrote before this. Basically a list of retail prices for all the different components. So Vic-20, $300. Tape drive, $80. The disk drive is $400. The printer, $500. The Right Now software, actually I think I found it priced at $40. If you were writing basic programs, you didn't have enough memory, you can buy memory cartridges to expand the memory up to 32K, I believe, 40K if you're doing machine language programming. There's a certain amount of memory that you could not access from the basic environment. So another $60 for an 8K RAM cartridge. I think it was close to $80 for a 16K RAM cartridge. Pretty much any game cartridge was about $25. Joystick was about $15. And in 1983, that would have cost you $1,419-ish. That's a lot of money then. Compare it to today's prices, it's equivalent to $3,705 in today's money, at least according to the inflation calculator. But it can still do stuff. You can play your games. You can learn to write software in BASIC and machine language. They actually had cartridges that would let you program in 6502 assembler language and make those games that were shown earlier today. If you had the intention to do that yourself, you can do that stuff. You can write your reports and save everything either on tape or disk. It depends on how much money you put into it. It was more than just a game machine with a keyboard. It did really serious stuff, and that's one of the things I wanted to do. Because this is so near and dear to me, and unfortunately I couldn't afford this when I was at that age. But if I could, I would have loved to have a setup like this. There's a lot that it can do. And I'm going to go ahead, just for the fun, just for the sound of that, I'm going to go ahead and print it, because we all love that dot matrix sound. And I am open to questions right now. I pretty much covered what I wanted to cover. So, ask away. If not, then we're going to be well ahead of schedule.
I got the question.
Okay, go ahead to the question.
Nothing yet, but I can ask you one.
Okay.
Let's say you have a Vic-20 and you move onto a 64. What's the compatibility like between the accessories, the software?
Well, the disk drives are compatible, the tape drive's compatible, the printer's compatible. They all work off the same Commodore serial interface. The joysticks will work, except you have 2 joystick ports. The software will not necessarily work. Some basic only software, which just prompts you with text, but doesn't do a whole lot in the way of graphics, will load up on a Commodore 64 and you can use that. And actually, I have an assembler class going on tomorrow which can demonstrate some assembly language techniques that will actually work between the Commodore VIC-20 and the Commodore 64. So you catch that tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I believe I'm scheduled for 10 for that.
No, not yet. So what are the main differences between this and the Commodore 64?
Well, starting price. The Commodore 64 started out at twice the price, $5.99 if I recall. The Commodore 64 does give you a lot more starting memory, I think 38,000 bytes right off the bat. Much higher resolution graphics and actually graphics capabilities that were almost built into it. This can do graphics, but it's kind of a hack. What it does, it takes whatever generates the dots for the characters, and you would actually lay out a field of characters, and then you would copy that to RAM, and then you would erase that RAM, and then plot dots by changing the character ROM definitions, and that's how you did graphics. It was really a hack, whereas the Commodore 64 actually had bitmap screens.
Did the VIC-20 coexist for long with the 64, or did Commodore really just, once the 64 came out, drop the VIC-20?
Well, the only thing they dropped with the VIC-20 was price. It was still popular for a while. I think the VIC-20 was about $200 when the Commodore 64 came out at $600, and the 64 came out in 1982. So I was still using my VIC-20 in 1982. I had it till I got out of high school in the mid 80s, and then it was after that I bought myself a Commodore 64. But you could still buy them at Kmart or Toys R Us. They were selling for $100 eventually, and then they got down to $80, and people were still buying because, well, it was a toy, I guess, then, because the Commodore 64 was more powerful. A lot of this stuff I acquired from people who used to actually use these on their VIC-20 and do some serious work with it, which gave me the idea for my exhibit. But yeah, the Commodore 64, natural progression from the VIC-20. A lot of the concepts of programming a Commodore 64 came from the VIC-20. Usually when you did graphics, you would use basic poke and peek commands to manipulate the numbers, and that went right onto the Commodore 64. It's what memory locations you poked and peeked that were really different, and how you used that.
Wonderful. The disks were not compatible. You couldn't transfer data, so if you had a VIC-20 and moved to a C64, you could only really use your accessories, or could you actually still transfer if you wrote programs?
If you wrote basic text-only software that would use some of the more rudimentary basic commands like print or to get keyboard input, that kind of stuff, would be compatible. So
you wouldn't have to retype them in?
No, you wouldn't have to. They would still load up directly, as long as they didn't have a machine language component to it, an assembly language component to it, or didn't make use of graphics and sound. So if you wrote a program that would do conversions, temperature conversions or whatnot, you could transfer that over, because you would be using the basic program print, and then you would ask for a value, and then would use a get function to collect the value from the user, and then it would process it. That stuff would work with the Commodore 64.
So the cassette and the disc format were the same?
Yes, they were.
Besides the nostalgia factor of that being your first computer, is there anything unique about the VIC-20 that really speaks to you?
I could tell a whole story of how I got my VIC-20. I actually had a choice between that, and I'm not going to get into any religious wars over things. It was actually, when I got mine, it was either between a Radio Shack color computer, the original one, the Coco 1 as they call it now, and the VIC-20. And one thing that I liked about the VIC-20 compared to what was out there at the time is that it has the full screen editor. Because some of the computers I played with at the time, you type in a program, if you want to fix a line, that's still on screen, you had to use like an edit command. This one, if I do, I'll do print hello, and let's just say I wanted to change that. Okay, this is my program here. While it's on screen, I can just go up here and maybe insert something like that. Full screen editing. That's one of the things that actually, when I had a choice.
I just wanted to reiterate that because when I'm doing VCF events or other exhibit type things, talking about Commodore versus other computers at the time, the on-screen editor was really far ahead of other computers on the market.
And Chris Fowler talking in the background.
Major feature that really set Commodore apart in that era.
And it works anywhere. You list your program, you can go to it like that. So,
Thanks, Chris, for walking over from your desk in the other room.
Well, I had more important questions than I was finding in the chat, so.
were we getting any in the chat?
Well, some people are sharing similar stories, Vic-20, that they're
Awesome,
on board for
awesome.
it.
So we should
I'd love to
mention
be able
that.
to
We
read
should
these.
mention that, yeah, if you're not on the channel, people are sharing very similar stories. I guess, if we're all around the same age, you're gonna have similar stories. If you're a little younger, you might have, gotten it. third
Everybody
hand.
remembers their first.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they say? I'm just glad I still own my first. This, like I said, this really is near and dear to me. I still have the original sticker from the Computers Unlimited store. I bought it from 10/22/1981. This is 39 years old in 2 weeks. 39 years old. And
You're
it
very
has their
best
sticker on
looking
the
day
side.
over 30.
Exactly. It's a little tan, but that's just the plastic they used. Everybody knows about the yellowing of the old plastics.
You had the original pen style keys too, right?
What I don't have is the original box. The original box was the foam pieces with the slide-on cardboard cover. I lost that a long time ago.
So that's with your Thurman Munson card that somehow got lost.
Exactly, yeah. And this has one of the original board layouts, off the Japanese version of this.
Is that the
Any
one
plans?
that does not have the heat sink on the
All it
rectifier?
does, this thing used to
the
burn
heat
my
sink-
hands.
There's a heat sink on the regulator, but then there's another heat sink on the rectifier. Some
Yes,
of them
this-
don't have that.
This has that.
Okay, that's not as old.
No,
Just-
not
just
as old,
saying.
but it's, I think it came out in the US market about 4 months prior to me getting this one, so
Makes
it was
sense.
still, and I bought it from an official Commodore/Apple dealership. They had PETs and they had Apple IIs there, and this was actually brand new to them when we got it. They didn't even know what it did, but it called to me, so that's why I said it's near and dear to me. We went to Radio Shack first. Nothing wrong with the Radio Shack one, just this called to me.
At least it wasn't called a trash 80.
Well, I have an appreciation for it now, but I just love my Vic. Maybe I'll get a bumper sticker.
Are you going to keep it original, or are you going to eventually retrowrite it?
I am not going to retrowrite this. People
Okay.
are offered to do it. It's honestly because of those stickers. That's ephemera. I just love that. I'd have to pull the sticker.
There's nothing wrong with that. I just was curious.
No, I could actually probably put it in one. Well, actually, there are different thickness Vic-20 cases. It's just subtle, but they do have, and some I think have different hooks and tabs to hold it. 'Cause
It's
you-
got the patina, it's aging with
Yeah.
him.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to turn yellow too someday, right?
No, seriously, the sentimental value of those labels is way more important than retro.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I just was
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah.
It is your first, right?
It is, yes.
your first computer. So it's
And-
like our first cars, our first computers, we all have a.
This is one of the first tapes I stored. That's my handwriting on there.
That's so
One of the
cool.
first stuff I've typed either.
Yeah,
I
hold
tried
that
to
up. I wanna
try to
see
program it
that.
myself, or I typed it from a magazine like this. Sometimes you subscribe to a magazine like Compute Magazine was very popular for many personal computers. And then later on, Commodore computers were so popular that they made this special Gazette version, which was for Commodore computers only. So that says something about the brand.
Where's the cotton gloves, man?
Yeah. Oh yeah, one other thing too. When you become a real power user and you don't want to keep switching out cartridges, you got something like this. This goes back in the expansion port. You can put up to 3 cartridges in it, and using these dip switches, you can switch between them and just hit this reset button, and you're in that new cartridge.
I got another question.
It's like a PC
Sure.
Junior, you didn't have to turn it off.
Exactly.
There's so many people making cool new pieces of hardware for the vintage computers, like SD2IC for Commodore 64,
Yes.
Gotex on the Amiga. Is there anyone making stuff for the Vic-20?
Well, I use my SD2 IEC for that.
Oh, you can use SD.
And-
SD is universal for all the computers that have it.
Because, and it's compatible with the Commodore 128, and I think the 16 can use it too, yeah, and the +4. And there is something called the penultimate cartridge for the VIC-20. It's one thing people tell me I need to get.
Yeah, actually, somebody did ask about multi-cards, so the
Yeah.
penultimate is.
Penultimate cartridge, and they were using that to play Defender earlier today.
Yeah.
It's just a nice menu list of pre-installed VIC-20 software, plugs right in the back, has additional features, I think extra memory came with it.
It has all the memory options.
And I'd love to buy those things for, I collect more than Commodore equipment, but I love to be able to buy that kind of stuff from my other ones, but you know, it's like $50 to $100, you know, should I spend it now, or should I, you know, eat, maybe, you know, a lot of different things that got to plan, but yeah, there's still support for these things with new, some people are creating new games, if it's not just new hardware to reuse it, and I actually programmed some stuff using Windows PC using a programming environment called, I forget the name, CBN Prague. And it's a really good environment to write programs in BASIC or machine language. It has some very modern features to it for writing software, and then when you compile the program, you can copy it to an SD card and stick it on the little SD devices that you can get for this and load it straight up. Or if you're really into it, you can put it onto a cartridge, which is something I plan on doing in the future.
That's cool.
Or maybe I'll just continue typing them in from the magazine.
How many times did it take you to debug that? Because every time I typed in a program for a magazine, I never got the.
Well, it only took me a month because the next month they had the errata page, which had all the fixes. Well, if they caught it right away, but you know, considering their subscription base, people caught the bugs right away, and it was always in that errors. They always had an errors page for the next month.
Well, I think we really have to thank you for showing off your VIC-20.
Oh, thank you.
And all the really great accessories and the loud printer.
Yeah, I have quieter ones, but it's just something about this,
Something
right?
about it, right?
And it's such a good condition.
And really amazing that you have your childhood, your first computer, you know, that in with the original everything, really.
I didn't sell it to
Everything.
buy a 64, yeah.
Or you didn't kind of throw it away or got chucked. You know, it's pretty amazing because usually, you know, back then, you know, we didn't think these things would be anything, right?
That's true.
Afterwards.
And now it's just by happenstance because I bought a 64 in 1985. And the VIC-20 just sat for almost 15 years untouched until I realized, oh wait, does this still work? And it did. I thought, okay, I remember this, and I got my old tapes out and stuff. So yeah, I lucked out with that. That's why it's pretty nice to have. And you're right. It's great when you can, you know, if you're really into it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And I guess we're gonna turn it over to the guys back in the room.